No man should ever have to face what I did. My home was targeted by a biker gang over an HOA dispute. They thought sending muscle would scare me off my land. What they encountered was someone trained to end conflicts, not start them. Before we start the story, please comment from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe the channel. The first warning wasn't the letter. It was my motion sensor light above the barn door. Flicked on at 2:18 a.m. and stayed lit, not from wildlife, just fully illuminated, catching something or someone. I didn't panic. Old habits from my Navy SEAL days. Never move until you've assessed the situation. I watched from my darkened living room, monitor glowing. Two figures moved slowly along my outer fence line. They moved like professionals but didn't realize they'd already been spotted. One had a slight limp. The other swept the area with a red-lensed flashlight. Short movements, low beam. That's military reconnaissance. They didn't break in. But one walked directly to my well cap, tapped it twice, then walked away. They left without taking anything but left something else behind. Next morning I found it nailed to my barn door. A black carved bone charm, a skull with barbed wire etched through it, military hash marks down the side. Not random vandalism. A marker. Just below it, boot tracks. Wider than average, deep impression. I followed them back 50 yards before they disappeared. Karen showed up 4 hours later. Didn't call, just walked halfway up my private drive with her designer dog and practiced smile. She wore a pastel windbreaker like it was armor. "Beautiful day," she said as if she wasn't standing a mile from her property. "Still private land," I replied. "Just getting some fresh air." "This is working land." She laughed artificially. "Some of us on the board have noticed equipment in violation of the HOA standards." "You mean the hay baler that's been here for 8 years? I'm sure you understand community aesthetics are important." "Aesthetic? This." I pointed to a goat that had just relieved itself nearby. Her lips tightened. "I would hate for this to become confrontational. You're already here with a leash on my gravel. It's not personal. Everything with you is personal. You tried to fine me for using a chainsaw at noon." She glanced toward the barn, paused too long. "Just remember we're a community, and communities only work when everyone cooperates." Inside my mailbox that afternoon was a violation notice. HOA letterhead, except this one had a second page. The footer read, "Notice 1 of 3 before legal enforcement action." Signed, Karen Whitaker, President, Ridgeline Valley HOA, Acting Director of Security Enforcement. I stared at that last title. I didn't elect anyone to those positions. That night, I pulled out my old SEAL equipment box. Inside, satellite phone, encrypted flash drive, and tools most civilians shouldn't know about. I wasn't hunting yet. But if they returned, I wouldn't be empty-handed. The motion sensor tripped again that night. Same spot, but this time it flickered once, then died. Power cut. 2 minutes later, the backup system buzzed. Someone was on the eastern trail. I checked the monitor. Same figures, same limp, but now they were looking directly at the camera. Just watching. Then they disappeared into the trees. The next morning I found my "No Trespassing" sign flipped. Not removed, just carefully reversed. That's not intimidation. That's communication. I spent hours checking wires, changing trail cam batteries, and reactivating the triple arms I'd buried when we had poachers. What bothered me most wasn't the letter or the charm. It was that tap on the well cap. I hadn't used that well in 5 years and nobody was supposed to know it was still connected. But someone did. They arrived the next day. 6 of them on matte black motorcycles, engines purring. They rolled past my gate at exactly 10:13 a.m., single file. No music, no waving. Just a precision cruise by. I stood watching. They never looked back. That was the first pass. They returned at sunset. Same formation. But this time one peeled off, just enough to touch the edge of my gravel. His tire nudged it, held for 3 seconds, then rejoined the pack. The next morning my mailbox was bent at a 30-degree angle. Not crushed. Bent just enough to send a message. The trail cameras were offline. One had its cord detached with surgical precision. Another had its lens unscrewed and neatly placed upside down on the fence post. That day I found one of my goats beyond the east fence. No blood, just a broken neck and a leather strap tied around its leg. The knot was a field binding, the exact technique we used in Baghdad when we needed to move livestock quietly. You don't learn that knot on YouTube. Someone had military training. Or worse, someone had worked with me. I packed that night. Didn't call the sheriff. I packed the way I was trained. Thermal scope, burner phone, suppressed sidearm, 2 magazines, and a worn coin I'd only carried on operations. A reminder that you don't run unless you're ready to chase. They led me to a bar with no address. I parked 2 lots over and waited. At 9:48 p.m. the bikes arrived. At 10:06 Karen stepped outside. She wore a hoodie stamped HOA Property Integrity Division, custom made. She laughed, clinked bottles, pointed across a map someone had unrolled. My valley. My land. She didn't look afraid. She looked like someone collecting a bonus. I went in through the kitchen door. I sat in a corner booth. Watch. Listen. He's stubborn, one guy said. So push again, said another. Karen's nervous. Karen doesn't matter, someone growled. The buyer wants him sweating, not bleeding. Yet. Karen wasn't running the show. She was middle management. And someone above her had added me to their list. One of the bikers entered. Mike Crawler. Ex-military. I hadn't seen him in 8 years, but the scar across his knuckles was unmistakable. He didn't see me, but another biker did. Guy at the bar turned, scanned the room, paused too long on my corner. I left before that scan became a signal. My barn was open when I got home. Inside, a crow hung upside down from the rafters. Neck twisted. Beneath it, a spent 5.56 millimeters casing. And 3 words carved into the door, "Still watching, sailor." Karen called the next morning. "Mr. Riggs," she said cheerfully, "we noticed you didn't submit your quarterly property form. You think I'm playing form games right now? I think you're agitated. Maybe unstable. You're arming contractors and trespassing. That's quite an accusation. I saw you at the bar with them." "I support local businesses," she said flatly. "You're burning bridges. If you're feeling unsafe, perhaps you're not a good fit for this neighborhood." "Say that again. Or perhaps you need a wellness check. I'd be happy to recommend a behavioral consultant." That wasn't concern. That was a threat dressed in silk. Later that week I stopped for gas 2 towns over. The guy behind the counter wore a name tag reading Jack, but the scar on his hand matched one of the bikers from the bar. I reinforced everything that night. When I checked the windows I saw it, a fingerprint on the inside pane. I took the print, ran it, and when the result came back I just stared at the name. Mike Crawler. I hadn't said his name in years. The man who left that print didn't just serve with me in the SEALs. I trained him. And now he was circling my land. We met during an operation that didn't officially exist. South of Baghdad. Mike was the kind of guy who laughed when bullets flew too close. Once, he dragged me out of a kill zone with a ruptured quad. "We're not dead yet," he joked, teeth blood-stained. That's what made this worse. He wasn't just dangerous. He was once my brother in arms. After the fingerprint match, I started building a picture. Pulled cell tower logs near Ridgeline Valley. One burner phone pinged from a motel 11 miles away. The power log showed a thermal spike every 4 hours. Someone was staying there. I drove out before dawn. Waited for hours. Then movement. A door opened. Mike stepped out. Same walk, same posture. He walked to the vending machine, got water. Then he looked straight at me. Didn't react. Just took a sip, walked back inside. He saw me and chose not to speak. I left something in his saddlebag. A folded photo. Us in Baghdad. On the back, "You owe me more than silence." Tucked inside, a single 5.56 round. That night my laptop lit up. Encrypted audio file. Mike's voice. "You always said we'd be ghosts when this ended. But you built a fence, Riggs. You stopped moving. Now you're a mark. Walk away from the HOA mess. This isn't your op, and next time I won't just send eyes." He paused. "That bullet you left? Cute. But I'm not bluffing either." I went to the barn, checked every hidden spot. There it was, a hard drive labeled Echo Phase 2. Inside was drone footage. Surveillance of my land. Heat maps. My movement patterns. But the final file was me walking the fence line with crosshairs centered on my back. The next day, Karen held a neighborhood resilience panel. "We all feel stressed," she said, "but stress makes us imagine threats where there are none." I stepped forward. "Funny you say that, because I've got hours of drone footage proving someone sees me as the threat." Karen blinked rapidly. "Mr. Riggs, this is a safe space." "I'm sure it is with your Blackwater cosplay running recon on my barn. You sound paranoid. And you sound cornered." I showed the crosshairs image. This was taken using military-grade optics. "You know who uses tech like this, Karen?" She stayed quiet. "Mike Crawler." "He's not sloppy," she snapped, then froze. "I didn't say he made a mistake. I said he was here." I misunderstood." "No, Karen. You remembered something you weren't supposed to." She smiled tightly. "If you're truly feeling unsafe, the board would be happy to suggest relocation options. If I'm going anywhere, I said, it'll be through your firewall. I walked out. The entire room felt like a balloon waiting for a pin. I went home and found an old logbook from my SEAL unit. Inside was an entry. Echo 6, disavowed 2017 alias, signal ghost. Current activity, unknown final order. If seen, neutralize. That was Mike. He'd been reactivated. The drive wasn't just surveillance. It was a checklist. And I wasn't the only one on it. Karen wasn't managing an HOA. She was running a target list. And Mike was the trigger man. They thought I was still playing defense. But you don't win by reacting. You win by rewriting the battlefield. I started with the HOA's digital ecosystem. I found their back-end gateway through their property management company. They used a system for behavioral compliance monitoring. The portal login was simple. Karen Whitaker 1. What I found was a digital killbook. 17 residents flagged as non-compliant, each with personal notes, camera footage, schedules, habits, asset values. Karen was logging lives like a hit list with HOA letterhead. So I mapped their recon. Launched my own. I set out a riding mower just off my property line. Battery rigged to cycle noise every 30 seconds. At 2:14 a.m. the tripwire snapped. Thermal picked up 2 heat signatures. They were testing my reaction time. 2 nights later, I tagged their bikes with tiny GPS beacons. All 6 eventually converged on an abandoned equipment lot 14 miles southwest. Their staging ground. Karen submitted a formal petition to have me relocated for community harmony. Filed under HOA Clause 7.12.4c, Non-Participatory Hostility Clause. Seconded by John H. Myers, but the signature matched Mike's handwriting. So I showed up to the HOA General Assembly. Karen's monthly power party. I walked in mid-meeting. Karen froze. Mr. Riggs, you're not on the speaker list. I'm not here to speak. I'm here to testify. I tossed a folder onto the table. Printed contracts. Vendor payments. Invoices to Ridgeline Valley Compliance Patrol. Photos, Mike on her porch. Her signature on a drone recon budget. This is fake, she said quickly. Metadata says otherwise. Created on your HOA-issued laptop. She looked around. No backup. Anyone could have hacked. The doc folder was called K Private Archives Do Not Touch. Uploaded from your guest Wi-Fi. A few people snorted. Her face cracked. You're bluffing. You know who I am? A paranoid loner with a gun fetish. Wrong. You're a target number. I'm the guy who trained the guy you hired to scare me. She started to dial her phone. I placed my hand on the table. Call them. Let's see how it plays out. She hesitated. You think you're untouchable. I think you're not pulling the strings anymore. The doors opened. My brother walked in. Sheriff Riggs. Full uniform. Behind him, deputies and a warrant. Karen's voice cracked. You can't be serious. He's your brother. That's why I didn't want to serve it, he said. You're framing me. No, Karen. You did that yourself. He turned to the board. This HOA is under investigation for conspiracy, fraud, and misuse of law enforcement-style contracting. If anyone else has been threatened, speak now. Half the room stood up. They escorted Karen out. But before leaving, she looked at me, eyes burning. You think this is over? Karen, this hasn't even started. The next day, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Inside, a photo of my house from a drone. Infrared overlay. And a note. Karen was the welcome mat. Now comes the front door. Karen was just the decoy. Now I'd pulled back the curtain and there was someone else watching. Someone with more resources and fewer rules. Karen was in custody. The board was folding. But if Karen was the tip of the spear, someone else held the shaft. The threats continued. Mailboxes rattling at night. Trail cams triggering. Drones flying overhead. So I went back to the HOA server logs. Karen had left breadcrumbs. A folder marked Circle 1/Active Ops contained a reference to Beta Site 3. Everything clicked. Beta Site 3 was a domestic test run for covert community stabilization. A think tank experiment disguised as an HOA initiative. Publicly shut down in 2016. But on paper only. This was still active. Karen wasn't a tyrant. She was a local manager for something bigger. I reached out to my old contact Lizzie. I need you to trace federal contractor shells linked to Circle 1 through HOA portals. She was quiet for 3 seconds. Jesus, you're really in it now. An hour later she had it. They're laundering intel through management platforms. Beta Site 3 is active. Langley fingerprints. Civilian contractors disguised as compliance reps. And the shooters? One name pops up. Alvarez. Ring a bell? It did. Alvarez was my spotter in the SEALs. Could see wind patterns like they were visible. Last I heard, he vanished after a blown mission. Now he was listed as R. Dale on a Ridgeline Valley Invoice 4 Specialized Community Oversight. I tracked his IP to a farmstead in Hollow Creek. Thermal showed 3 warm bodies inside. Training. I left him a shell with a scratched message, "You owe me an answer." He called the next night. I told him you wouldn't stay buried. You knew it was me. You didn't hide your prints. You're working for them. I'm surviving. That's what we called it when we had no choice. We still don't. They sent Mike, but he wasn't enough. You rattled Karen so hard she started improvising. That's why I stepped in. So what now? Now they pay me to clean up the mess. I needed a location. A hierarchy. A crack in the chain. Alvarez gave me one. They call it the circle. You were always outside it, now you're in the middle. And they're closing in. I fortified the ranch. Laid silent perimeter mics. Tethered IR trip wires to flare triggers. Rigged my garage with a magnetic lock. At 3:38 a.m., alarm triggered on the north fence. One biker. Not Mike. Younger. Walking the perimeter. When he reached the barn, the trap sprung. Tripwire caught his leg and snapped him into the dirt. His mic was hot. Subject perimeter compromised, he whispered. No visual on asset. I stepped out. That's because the asset has visual on you. He reached for his belt. I fired one round next to his hand. Next one doesn't miss. His eyes widened. You're not supposed to be... What? Awake? Armed? Or alive? I cuffed him and left him for the sheriff. Next day Karen tried again. Out on bail. Back in her power suit. She showed up at my gate. Clipboard in hand. Lawyer in tow. Mr. Riggs, this is a courtesy visit to remind you you're trespassing. You've been deemed a hostile actor. You've been deemed irrelevant. You may have stopped my people, but you haven't stopped the program. You think you're funny? I think I'm free. Karen leaned in. This doesn't end with me. You made the circle look weak. They'll fix that. Good. Let them try. That night I got an envelope. Inside, a check for 7 figures. No signature. Just a note. Everyone has a price. I burned it. The next morning, Alvarez showed up in person. No weapon. Just him. What now? I asked. They're going dark. Why? You made too much noise. Your brother's probe got DHS attention. Langley scrubbing the operation. So it's over. He shook his head. They're just changing names. And you? I'm out if you let me walk. You owe me answers. I gave you more than they would have allowed. He turned and walked. I let him go. But I didn't stop preparing. There was one final file on Karen's server. When I cracked it, just a heading, reassignment, pilot zone Midwest beta, and coordinates. Not for Ridgeline Valley. Somewhere else. This wasn't the end. Just the end of my chapter. The sheriff's office took all the files. Every HOA budget log, drone invoice, and community wellness report was now evidence in a federal investigation. By the time the feds showed up, Karen was gone. No statement. No arrest. Just vanished. Even her name was wiped from the HOA website. The board posted, due to unforeseen transitions, Ridgeline Valley HOA will be restructuring operations. I walked the ranch the next morning. At the northern fence, I found one last surveillance node tucked inside a fake fence post cap. Still active. I crushed it and tossed it into the well. No more watchers. Then I collected every bug, camera, and signal trap. Dropped them into a steel drum. Lit the fuse. Watched them melt to nothing. Lizzie called later. Congratulations. Your case file just closed. You sure? Your brother's team triggered a federal flag when they uploaded the HOA's metadata. Langley denied knowledge. DHS played dumb. But someone shut it down fast. So they're scrubbing everywhere but one place. Where? Midwest. A new Phase 3 site. Send me what you got. Already did. You're not done, are you? They wanted me to quit. They should have offered more than money. My brother showed up that evening. Brought burgers and beer. We sat on the porch watching the sunset. You planning on staying? He asked. For now. You going to rebuild? Maybe. Or I take what I know and burn the rest of this thing to the ground. He handed me a beer. You always did like to overachieve. That night I found a package at my gate. Steel case. Unmarked. Inside, A burner phone, a USB drive, a folded patch. Navy SEAL emblem but altered. The usual trident replaced with a hollow black circle. Stitched underneath, Phase 3 initiated. Awaiting asset confirmation. I sat in the garage surrounded by gear I hadn't touched in years. Maps, field guides, communications equipment, and my old dog tags. The phone lit up at 0400. Blocked number. One text, confirm receipt. Awaiting position. I walked outside, stood under the stars, then said aloud, "You really think I'm the kind of man who turns down a second war? Because here's the thing they never understood. You can buy silence. You can bury it under money or threats. But once someone's seen the machine, you can't make them unsee it. And some of us, we don't forget. We don't forgive. We get ready." So Karen's gone. The HOA is dead. But the circle just changed locations. And the next time they try this, they'll have to answer to someone who's been through it, and made damn sure he came out the other side.